Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everybody. Today we're diving into a real classic, one that a lot of us probably think we know pretty well. But maybe there's more to it than meets the eye.
hmm
We're talking about Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. And you, our lovely listeners, you wanted to know, well, you were really curious about getting a quick but thorough understanding of this book, this cornerstone of English literature, hoping, of course, that we might unearth some surprising insights along the way, right?
Right.
And that's precisely what we're setting out to do in this deep dive, to excavate the core of this enduring story and, really focus on the fascinating transformation of Ebenezer Scrooge.
And the tool we're going to use for this excavation is the source itself, Dickens' wonderfully crafted novella.
Okay, so let's get right into it, shall we? Dickens really kicks things off with a statement that leaves absolutely no room for doubt. Marley was dead to begin with. Like, just in case you weren't sure, there is no doubt whatever about that. I mean, he even throws in this, almost humorous detail about Scrooge signing the burial register. Apparently, Scrooge's signature was, the gold standard, a mark of serious credibility on the exchange.
Oh, wow.
And then, of course, there's that incredibly vivid comparison. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. And he even admits, Dickens that is, that he's not entirely sure why a doornail is so definitively dead, but it's the saying, right?
Right.
So this forceful opening, this insistence on the absolute certainty of Marley's death, what do you think it tells us right off the bat?
Well, I think what's fascinating here is this, Dickens' real insistence on this absolute certainty. It's almost like he anticipates skepticism, like he's expecting the reader to question these supernatural events that are going to unfold. And so by really grounding this story firmly in the reality of Marley's death, he makes the ghostly visitations that come later all the more impactful and unsettling. And it forces us, the reader, and of course Scrooge, to confront the possibility of a reality beyond just the material world.
Right, because if Marley can come back, well, who knows what else is possible. Right.
Exactly.
And then, almost immediately, we meet Ebenezer Scrooge. And the description is just powerful, secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. That single image, it really paints a picture of profound isolation, don't you think? What strikes you most about that initial description?
I think the oyster simile is just so effective because it suggests, this hard, impenetrable exterior, but concealing something within, right? And the big question I think that the story explores is that something a pearl of potential goodness? Or is it just more isolation?
Right.
So Dickens immediately establishes Scrooge as someone who's deliberately shut himself off from the world.
And Dickens really piles on the details of this isolation. He talks about how the cold within him actually shapes his physical appearance, nipping his nose, shriveling his cheek, even making his eyes and lips look cold, like his inner state is literally freezing him from the outside in.
It's so vivid.
And he even carries this chill around with him, doesn't he? Icing his office in the summer and remaining stubbornly cold even at Christmas.
It's brilliant, really. It's such a great example of Dickens using pathetic fallacy, where the environment mirrors the character's inner state. So Scrooge's coldness, it isn't just metaphorical. It's a tangible presence that actually affects everything around him. It emphasizes how deeply ingrained his miserly disposition really is.
And it's not just the weather that recoils from him, is it? People actively avoid him. No friendly greetings, no beggars pleading for a coin. Children won't even ask him the time. Even the blind men's dogs with their heightened senses would steer their owners away, as if they could sense something truly unpleasant about him.
It's almost like a physical repulsion.
And here's the kicker, the really disturbing thing. Scrooge likes it. He sees this ability to, repel human connection as nuts. His word for, agreeable or satisfying. It's a really disturbing insight into his mindset.
Yeah, it really underscores just how much Scrooge has not only become isolated, but is actively cultivating that isolation. It's not just a consequence of his miserliness, it's a deliberate choice. He's actually inverted those normal human desires for connection, and he finds satisfaction in pushing people away. And this just makes his eventual transformation all the more significant.
Absolutely. So then we're dropped right into Scrooge's counting house. It's Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
And the atmosphere is grim, bleak, foggy, biting weather, mirroring, again, Scrooge's own internal landscape. And even though it's only 3 in the afternoon, it's already dark. We get this almost sad image of his clerk, Bob Cratchit, stuck in this dismal little cell, described as like a sort of tank, with a fire so tiny it barely even qualifies as warmth. And of course, Scrooge, in his infinite generosity, keeps the coal box under lock and key.
Right.
What does this setting, this initial setting, tell us about the power dynamic at play here?
Well, it immediately highlights those really stark social and economic inequalities that Dickens is so keen to explore. I mean, the contrast between Scrooge's complete control over resources and Cratchit's, his utter dependence and suffering really underscores that human cost of Scrooge's greed. It sets up this moral and ethical framework for the entire story right from the beginning.
Right. And then like a burst of sunlight in this gloomy scene, a cheerful voice rings out.
A Merry Christmas, Uncle. God save you. It's his nephew Fred, just radiating warmth, even from his brisk walk in the fog. But Scrooge's response, immediate and utterly predictable. Ah, humbug.
Of course.
He questions his nephew's right to be merry when he's not wealthy himself, dismisses the whole concept of Christmas as foolishness. So what do you think is behind this really vehement rejection of Christmas? Well, for Scrooge, Christmas represents, everything he's come to despise. Sentimentality, generosity, a focus on human connection rather than financial gain. He sees it as an unproductive interruption to business, a drain on resources, a celebration of values that are totally alien to him. And so his humbug, it's almost like a defensive mechanism, a way to shield himself from emotions he's suppressed for so long.
Right. And Fred offers this really beautiful counterargument, doesn't he?
He does.
He acknowledges that Christmas hasn't made him rich, but he sees it as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The one period in the year when people, genuinely consider each other as fellow human beings. He even says, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good and will do me good, and I say God bless it. It's a powerful defense of the spirit of Christmas, especially coming from someone that Scrooge likely views as, less successful than himself.
Absolutely. Fred embodies all the values that Scrooge rejects. He understands that true wealth lies not in material possessions, but in human relationships and goodwill. And his unwavering optimism, his cheerful disposition, they serve as this constant challenge to Scrooge's cynicism.
And Scrooge, completely unmoved, just tells his nephew to keep Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mine. To which Fred rightly points out that Scrooge doesn't actually keep it at all.
Right.
And then we have the arrival of the portly gentleman seeking charitable donations for the poor and destitute. And Scrooge's response here is just, well, it's peak Scrooge, isn't it?
Yeah.
He wants to know if prisons and workhouses are still operating, clearly believing that these should be sufficient for anyone in need. What does this reliance on institutions tell us about Scrooge's sense of personal responsibility?
Well, it really reveals that fundamental disconnect between Scrooge and the human cost of poverty. He sees the poor as an absolute societal problem that should be managed by institutions, not as, individual human beings who are deserving of empathy and assistance. And it's a way for him to absolve himself of any personal responsibility for their well-being.
And when the gentleman mentions that they aim to provide the poor with some meat and drink and means of warmth, Scrooge's reply is truly chilling. Nothing. And when they press him, asking if he'd like to remain anonymous in his lack of contribution, he snaps back, I wish to be left alone. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. Those who are badly off must go there, the workhouses. And then, of course, comes that infamous line about decreasing the surplus population.
Oh.
It's a truly heartless statement.
It is. It's a really brutal articulation of Scrooge's, Malthusian worldview, where the poor are seen as a drain on society. And this statement is just so shocking in its callousness. It really highlights that depth of his moral bankruptcy at the beginning of the story, just a complete lack of compassion.
The gentlemen, recognizing the futility of their efforts, politely withdraw. And Scrooge, in his own warped way, probably feels quite self-satisfied. But the routine of his evening is about to take a dramatic turn when he gets home. Because, that ordinary door knocker, it morphs into the face of Jacob Marley.
What?
It's not even a fleeting glimpse. Scrooge stares intently at it, and then just as suddenly, it's a knocker again. So what do you make of this first supernatural event?
I think this is the first real sign that Scrooge's rigidly materialistic worldview is starting to crack. That inexplicable appearance of Marley's face, it challenges his whole understanding of reality, and it hints at those supernatural forces that are about to disrupt his carefully constructed isolation.
And his attempts to rationalize it afterward, well, they're a very human reaction to the unbelievable.
They are.
So he's definitely shaken, but he tries to find a logical explanation. He goes inside, lights his candle, even checks behind the door, half expecting to see Marley's pigtail. Right. Finding nothing, he slams the door. The sound echoing eerily through the silent house. Then, as he's having his meager gruel by a pathetic little fire, remember, it's freezing out.
Mm.
The disused bell in his room starts to swing, followed by all the bells in the house ringing wildly. It must have been absolutely terrifying.
It would have been. And those escalating supernatural occurrences, they really serve to break down Scrooge's defenses.
Mm.
That ringing of the bells, it's like this powerful auditory hallucination. It amplifies his growing unease and signals that imminent arrival of something truly extraordinary. This is a sensory assault designed to shatter his complacency.
And then, through this solid bolted door, appears Marley's ghost.
Hmm.
And Dickens provides this incredibly detailed, quite unsettling description. The familiar pigtail, waistcoat, tights, even the tassels on his boots are bristling. And then, of course, the chain, wound around him like a tail, forged from cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy steel purses, all those symbols of his life's obsession, right?
Right.
And then, the truly chilling detail. Marley's transparent. Scrooge can see the buttons on his coat right through his waistcoat. So what's the significance of these very specific details?
Well, the chain is such a pertinent visual representation of the burden of Marley's earthly concerns, this failure to really engage with humanity during his lifetime. Each link symbolizes a missed opportunity for kindness and connection. And his transparency, of course, that really underscores his spectral nature, highlighting his inability to interact with the living world or to undo the consequences of his past actions.
And Scrooge, ever the rationalist, he still tries to deny what he's seeing, suggesting that Marley's just an undigested bit of beef or a blot of mustard.
Mm-hmm.
He is desperately clinging to his familiar understanding of the world.
But, I mean, come on.
But Marley's appearance is undeniably disturbing. Complete with his own infernal atmosphere, his hair and clothes moving as if in a hot wind even though he's perfectly still.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really unsettling image.
It is. And Scrooge's attempts to find a logical explanation, however ridiculous they are, they reveal his deep-seated fear and resistance to accepting the supernatural. It's a psychological defense mechanism against this terrifying reality that's confronting him, and that infernal atmosphere, it just adds to the sense of dread and otherworldliness.
And then comes that truly terrifying moment when Marley unwinds the bandage around his head and his lower jaw drops down to his chest. Ugh. It's a gruesome detail, and it's finally enough to break Scrooge's denial. He collapses to his knees, begging for mercy, and Marley's response is almost accusatory. "Man of the worldly mind, do you believe in me or not?" And Scrooge is first to admit, "I do." So what's the turning point here?
It's that physical horror, that dropping jaw. It finally overwhelms all of Scrooge's rationalizations. It's that visceral confrontation with the supernatural that completely shatters his skepticism. And his admission of belief, well, that marks a crucial step in his journey because he's acknowledging a reality beyond his materialistic worldview.
And Marley then reveals the purpose of his visit. To warn Scrooge of the eternal consequences of a life lived without compassion, he laments his own fate, forced to wander the earth, witnessing the good he can no longer participate in because he didn't engage with mankind in life. And then that truly iconic line, "Mankind was my business." And he shows Scrooge the heavy chain he forged in life, link by link, a chain that Scrooge himself is now laboring to create. So what's the core message of Marley's lament?
It's a stark warning about the true measure of a life, isn't it? He's emphasizing that worldly success and material wealth are meaningless in the face of eternity if they're not accompanied by kindness, compassion, and that genuine connection to humanity. Mankind was my business. It's a powerful indictment of a life that's solely focused on self-interest.
And Scrooge looks around, probably expecting to see a physical chain, but of course it's invisible. The weight of his choices, right? And he desperately asks Marley for some comfort, but Marley has none to offer. Instead, he reveals that he's there to offer Scrooge a chance to avoid a similar fate through the visits of three spirits. And Scrooge, ever the pragmatist, he even tries to bargain, asking, "Couldn't I take them all at once and have it over, Jacob?"
He just wants to get it over with.
But no such luck. Marley lays out the schedule and then departs with that chilling sound of his teeth snapping back into place. It must have left Scrooge in utter terror.
Oh, absolutely. And that attempt to expedite the visits, it just reviews his underlying fear. It's like he wants to get through this whole ordeal as quickly as possible, even though he doesn't fully grasp the significance of what's to come. It shows that glimmer of self-preservation, though, even in his terror.
But the night's horrors aren't over yet, are they? Scrooge follows Marley to the window and sees the air filled with these countless phantoms, all wearing chains, moaning restlessly. Many of them people Scrooge actually knew in life. One particularly poignant example is this old ghost in a white waistcoat. He's desperately trying to help a woman with a baby on a doorstep, but he can't because he's got this massive iron safe attached to his ankle. And the overwhelming sense is their utter helplessness, their regret at their lost opportunities for good. So what's the impact of this final vision, do you think?
Well, it reinforces Marley's warning, but on a massive scale. It provides this terrifying glimpse into the collective fate of those who prioritize material wealth and self-interest over human compassion. And their chains, they're instruments of their eternal torment now, preventing them from rectifying their past failures.
So it's a powerful and unsettling image for Scrooge to witness as the phantoms fade away. He's completely shaken, secures his locked door, manages a weak, unconvincing humbug, and utterly exhausted, collapses into sleep without even taking off his clothes. And that brings us to stave 2, and the arrival of the first of these promised spirits. When Scrooge wakes, he's totally disoriented. The church clock chimes this impossible sequence from 6 all the way to 12, and then it stops. His own repeater watch also strikes 12. He's completely confused, wondering if he somehow slept through an entire day or something's gone completely wrong with time itself.
Well, that's unsettling, isn't it?
What's the significance of this temporal confusion, this messing with time?
I think it signifies Scrooge's entry into a realm that's beyond the ordinary. It underscores that supernatural nature of the visitations and prepares him for a journey through his past, which is also going to transcend the normal constraints of time.
And eventually he remembers Marley's warning about the first spirit arriving when the bell tolls one, and he decides to stay awake, which, given his earlier sleeplessness, seems like a pretty sensible plan.
Yeah.
The quarter hours tick by slowly, making him wonder if he's drifted off after all. But finally the hour bell strikes a deep, resonant 1. And instantly, light floods the room and his bed curtains are drawn aside by an unseen hand. It's a rather dramatic entrance.
It is. The sudden burst of light in the darkness creates the sense of wonder and emphasizes that ethereal nature of the spirit. And the act of drawing aside of the curtains, well, it signifies that Scrooge is no longer in control. He's being guided, even confronted, by forces beyond his understanding.
And there stands the ghost of Christmas past. And Dickens describes it in this really peculiar way. Not quite a child, yet not an old man either, with this fluctuating form and a brilliant, almost blinding light emanating from its head. Its belt sparkles and shimmers, and its appearance keeps shifting. Now a single arm, now a leg, then many limbs, then just a head or just legs. It's constantly dissolving and reforming before Scrooge's very eyes. So what does this very unusual description tell us about the nature of memory itself?
I think the ghost's shifting form reflects that really fluid and often unreliable nature of memory. It's not a fixed entity, right? But rather a collection of impressions that can change and fade over time. And the light emanating from its head, well, that symbolizes the clarity and illumination that looking into the past can provide, even if those memories are sometimes fragmented or incomplete.
And Scrooge, still clinging to his old ways, immediately asks if the spirit could perhaps dim its light a bit.
Oh, Scrooge.
But the spirit's response is really quite sharp, isn't it?
It-
What? Would you so soon put out, with worldly hands, the light I give? Is it not enough that you are one of those whose passions made this cap and forced me through whole trains of years to wear it low upon my brow? It seems to imply that Scrooge's own earthly concerns have obscured his past.
Precisely. The spirit is suggesting that Scrooge's preoccupation with worldly matters has actually led him to suppress, maybe even distort his memories. And that cap symbolizes the way he's tried to extinguish that emotional light of his past, and the spirit is now forcing him to confront those buried feelings.
And so the spirit guides Scrooge back in time. And their first stop is Scrooge's childhood at this lonely boarding school during the Christmas season. We see him as the solitary young boy, seemingly forgotten by his friends. He finds solace only in his books and the imaginative adventures of characters like Ali Baba. It's a rather sad and isolating image of young Ebenezer, isn't it? So what do you think the long-term impact of this early loneliness might have been?
Well, this early isolation probably played a huge role in shaping Scrooge's later emotional detachment. The lack of connection and warmth in his childhood probably led him to build up these walls around himself, seeking comfort in that predictable and controllable world of finance rather than the messy and unpredictable realm of human relationships.
He retreated into the world of numbers.
Exactly. And his immersion in books, that could be seen as both an escape and a substitute for real-world interaction.
And then a moment of pure joy breaks through this solitude, the arrival of his younger sister, Fan. She's described as this, delicate creature, but possessing this large heart. And she brings him the wonderful news that he's coming home for good, a moment that clearly evokes a really strong emotional response in the older Scrooge. And the ghost even draws a direct connection between Fan and Scrooge's nephew, Fred, reminding us of that familial love that Scrooge seems to have forgotten. What do you think Fan represents in Scrooge's past?
I think she represents unconditional love, that familial warmth, the possibility of genuine human connection. And her joyous spirit is, such a stark contrast to Scrooge's later cynicism. And the link to Fred highlights the enduring nature of that familial love, which Scrooge has continued to reject in his adult life. Her early death, which is implied later on, might have contributed to Scrooge's hardening of heart.
So their journey through the past continues, and now we see Scrooge during his apprenticeship with the jovial Fezziwig. And oh, this is such a vibrant and heartwarming scene. The warehouse is transformed into this festive party venue, complete with a lively fiddler, the beaming Mrs. Fezziwig, their daughters, and all the happy employees. There's dancing, laughter, and this real sense of community and merriment. And Fezziwig, despite being a businessman himself, clearly values the happiness and well-being of his staff. How does this contrast with Scrooge's treatment of Bob Cratchit?
It's a complete 180, isn't it? I mean, Fezziwig embodies this completely different model of leadership. He demonstrates that business success doesn't have to come at the expense of employee happiness. His generosity, it might not be extravagant in financial terms, but it creates this positive and supportive work environment. And this directly contrasts with Scrooge's parsimony and his really cold, impersonal treatment of Cratchit. It highlights Scrooge's really flawed understanding of human value.
And Scrooge has this really powerful emotional reaction to this memory. He actually wishes he could say a kind word or two to his own clerk. And the ghost then makes a pointed remark about how little Fezziwig's generosity actually cost him, yet it brought so much joy. It's a clear challenge to Scrooge's miserly ways. It's like the spirit is saying, look, it doesn't take much to make a real difference.
Exactly. The spirit's showing Scrooge the tangible impact of even small acts of kindness and generosity. And it forces him to confront the fact that his own, stinginess not only harms Cratchit financially, but it deprives him of basic human dignity and joy in the workplace.
But then the mood shifts really dramatically, doesn't it? We see Scrooge as a younger man, but now with care and avarice etched on his face. He's with his fiancée, a woman who clearly recognizes his growing obsession with wealth. And she makes this poignant statement about how their contract was an old one, made when they were both poor and content. But he's a different man now, and she releases him from their engagement, hoping he'll find happiness in the path he's chosen. It's a heartbreaking scene of love lost to ambition.
It is.
What does this moment reveal about Scrooge's changing priorities?
This is a crucial turning point for Scrooge. It shows the moment his pursuit of wealth began to overshadow everything else. His personal relationships, his capacity for love. And he made a conscious choice to prioritize financial gain over emotional fulfillment, a decision that ultimately led to his isolation. And his fiancée's words really highlight that human cost of his ambition.
The final memory the ghost shows Scrooge involves this same woman, but now she's a happy wife and mother, children, loving husband. And she's just casually mentioning her past relationship with Scrooge, almost with a sense of pity rather than bitterness. And the contrast between her warm, joyful family life and the solitary existence Scrooge leads now, well, it's stark and deeply unsettling, even for us.
Absolutely.
What's the final emotional blow delivered by this last glimpse of Christmas past?
It underscores the complete life that Scrooge has missed out on. He sees the happiness, the love, the connection that he could have had, a life that's now beyond his reach because of his choices. And it highlights the emptiness of his wealth compared to the richness of a life shared with loved ones, and the pity in her voice. That's maybe the most cutting indictment of his self-imposed isolation.
Overwhelmed by these painful memories, Scrooge tries to extinguish the spirit's light with the extinguisher cap. It's a symbolic act, isn't it? This trying to suppress these uncomfortable truths. But the light persists. Just as the past, no matter how painful, can never be fully erased. He's left totally drained and falls into a troubled sleep back in his own bed. His resistance to confronting his past is so palpable, isn't it?
It is. Trying to extinguish the light. That signifies his discomfort with the emotions these memoirs are stirring up. He wants to go back to that denial. But the light's persistence, it symbolizes the enduring power of the past and its inescapable influence on the present.
And as he drifts off into what must have been a really restless sleep, we move into stave 3. And the truly grand, almost overwhelming arrival of the Ghost of Christmas Present. Scrooge wakes to find his room has undergone a total transformation. It's like stepping into a Christmas wonderland, overflowing with its incredible abundance of food and drink. There's a massive roaring fire in the hearth, and right there, enthroned amidst all this festive cheer, sits a jolly giant, the Ghost of Christmas Present himself, holding a glowing torch that looks like Plenty's horn. So what's the immediate impression this spirit and his surroundings create?
It's the sheer abundance, the warmth of this transformed room, the spirit's demeanor, this jovial nature. It embodies the spirit of Christmas present, this generosity, feasting, communal joy. It's a sensory overload that directly contrasts with the austerity and coldness of Scrooge's usual environment in his past.
And this spirit is quite a character. He explains that while he appears young, he's got over 1,800 brothers representing all the previous Christmas presents throughout history. And then he takes Scrooge on this whirlwind tour of the city on Christmas morning. And despite this really harsh winter weather, there's this incredible vibrancy. People cheerfully clearing snow, shops are bustling with all sorts of festive goods like enormous turkeys, plump geese, fragrant fruit, exotic spices. People are even carrying their prepared dinners to the bakeries.
Imagine that.
The spirit even sprinkles incense from his torch, which seems to be this gesture of blessing these joyful scenes below. So what's the significance of showing Scrooge this widespread Christmas cheer, all this joy all over the city?
It broadens his perspective, doesn't it?
It does.
You know, he's always viewed Christmas as a personal inconvenience, right? But the Spirit's showing him it's this widespread celebration bringing joy and connection to people from all walks of life, regardless of their circumstances. And that blessing, that reinforces that positive and life-affirming nature of the holiday.
And Scrooge's earlier dismissive, frankly cruel comments about the poor and the workhouses come back to haunt him here, don't they? The spirit gently pushes back, highlighting this idea of innocent enjoyment and pointing out the irony that the very name workhouses is often misrepresented by those on earth. It's a subtle but really powerful critique of societal attitudes towards poverty.
Absolutely. The Spirit challenges Scrooge's very, utilitarian view of the poor, asserting their right to simple pleasures and criticizing the hypocrisy of a society that claims to care for the poor but subjects them to these really harsh and dehumanizing conditions. It's a direct counterpoint to Scrooge's earlier justifications for his lack of charity.
Then they visit the incredibly humble home of Bob Cratchit. And despite their obvious financial struggles, their joy at their Christmas dinner is so palpable, even with their modest goose and small plum pudding. And here we're formally introduced to Tiny Tim with his little crutch, a detail that's instantly affecting. So what's the impact of this intimate look into the Cratchit family's Christmas?
Well, the Cratchit family, they embody this resilience, this ability to find profound joy even in the face of poverty. Their love for each other, their gratitude for what little they have, it's a powerful counterpoint to Scrooge's miserliness and discontent despite his wealth. And Tiny Tim's vulnerability evokes this, immediate compassion, highlighting the human cost of Scrooge's indifference.
And there's that awkward but ultimately touching toast to Mr. Scrooge, initiated by the ever-loyal Bob, despite Mrs. Cratchit's very obvious resentment. And then the ghost reveals this chilling vision of a vacant seat by the fire and a small crutch without an owner if the future remains unchanged. And it's a direct consequence of Scrooge's earlier callous words about the surplus population coming to life before his eyes.
I know. Chillin'.
What's the intended effect of this vision, do you think?
This is that pivotal moment, isn't it? That image of Tiny Tim's death, directly linked to Scrooge's lack of compassion. It forces him to confront the human consequences of his actions in a deeply personal way. And it's a powerful catalyst for his growing remorse and fear for the future.
The spirit continues to show Scrooge other scenes of Christmas cheer, in all sorts of diverse and unexpected places. Miners finding warmth and camaraderie in their isolated hut, lighthouse keepers sharing this solitary but heartfelt Christmas. And then back to Scrooge's nephew Fred's lively Christmas party. And Fred, despite Scrooge's continued rudeness, his rejection, he consistently maintains this good-natured tolerance, making a point of including him in their celebrations every year.
Yeah.
What does Fred's unwavering kindness reveal about his character? And maybe even about the true spirit of Christmas?
I think Fred's kindness, his persistence in the face of Scrooge's hostility, that underscores the unconditional nature of the Christmas spirit, doesn't it?
It does.
He embodies forgiveness, generosity, this unwavering belief in the potential for connection, even with someone as seemingly unredeemable as his uncle. He demonstrates that the spirit of Christmas isn't dependent on reciprocation.
And we even get to see those fun and games at Fred's party. Blind man's buff, forfeits, and that wonderfully silly game of yes and no where they're trying to guess what animal he's thinking of.
I love that game.
It's amusing to think of this unseen Scrooge, possibly even trying to play along with them, right?
Yeah.
So what's the purpose of showing Scrooge these lighthearted moments, these moments of communal joy?
Well, I think it further emphasizes those simple pleasures, that genuine happiness that Scrooge is missing out on because he's isolating himself. And they highlight the warmth and connection that come from those shared experiences, reminding him of the joy that human interaction can actually bring. Even that subtle hint of his potential participation, that underscores his buried longing for connection.
But the time with the Ghost of Christmas Present is drawing to a close. And the spirit, he starts to age rapidly before Scrooge's eyes, and he reveals that his earthly lifespan is limited to this one Christmas Day night. And then comes this truly sobering and disturbing reveal from beneath his robes. Two wretched, starving children clinging to him, ignorance and want. And the spirit's stark warning about them, particularly about ignorance leading to doom, is a powerful piece of social commentary.
Oh, absolutely. Ignorance and want, they're these allegorical representations of the societal ills that Dickens believed were perpetuated by neglect and indifference, right?
Yeah, right.
Ignorance breeds suffering, and want is the inevitable consequence. And the Spirit's warning emphasizes that urgent need for social responsibility and the dangers of ignoring the plight of the most vulnerable.
And with that stark, unsettling image, the vibrant Ghost of Christmas Present vanishes, leaving Scrooge alone and paving the way for the final and, I think, most feared spirit. Stave 4 begins with the slow, silent, and utterly foreboding approach of the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come.
Oh, yeah.
This one's shrouded in black from head to foot, just exuding this aura of profound gloom and mystery, and its complete silence is far more terrifying to Scrooge than any words could ever be. So what's the immediate impact of this spirit's presence?
Well, I think the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come inspires this deep, primal fear in Scrooge. And its silence, that shrouded form, they create a sense of the unknown and the inevitable. And it represents, the ultimate consequence of his current path. And its presence compels him to confront his own mortality and the potential legacy of his life.
And Scrooge, he instinctively falls to his knees before this silent phantom. And he understands that this spirit will only show him shadows of things that will happen if he doesn't change his ways. And the spirit, true to form, doesn't say a single word, simply points onward with his skeletal hand, wordlessly leading a terrified Scrooge into this bleak landscape of the future.
Mm-hmm.
What does this nonverbal communication emphasize, do you think?
Well,